Okay, so we are in module 5, chapter 4. So we're talking about common denominators and equivalent fractions. I know that I've already talked to you a little bit about common denominators and what that looks like, as well as equivalent fractions, right? So remember, I can't add or subtract or do anything with unequal denominators, okay? We divide these fractions so that they have a common denominator. So I'm going to look at my problem here, and then I'm going to find the common denominator within my two numbers. So Sarah planted 2 1-acre gardens. One had 3 sections of flowers, and the other had 4 sections of flowers. She plans to divide both gardens into more sections so that they have the same number of equal-sized sections. Sections will each garden have. Okay, so I'm going to find a common denominator or a common multiple of 2 or more denominators to write fractions that name the same part of a whole. So first I need to find my common denominator. So whenever I think of a number 3 and 4, we've already talked about it in the previous 2 chapters, or 3 chapters. How are 3 and 4 related when we talk about multiplication facts? Elizabeth. 3 and 4? Yeah. What are they? How are they related? You want me to do division? What's the multiple of 3 and 4? When, okay. Lindsay, help me out.
6, 9, 4.
Ah. 12 is the one on the left.
I thought you.
No, that's okay. And so 12 is a common number, right? A common multiple. So I'm going to divide each third into fourths because remember, I'm multiplying, right? I'm multiplying the 3 times 4 to get my 12, right? So I'm going to multiply 3 times 4, and that would eventually give me what? I would have to multiply not just the denominator, but my Joseph, my numerator, right? So here, I'm going to divide each third into fourths. How would I do that? How many lines do I need to make in each section if I'm going to divide it into fourths? Okay, 3, right? Try to make it as even as possible. You do that in each section. 3 lines to make fourths. Remember, it's always one less line because 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then I would have to divide my fourth into thirds, right? So we're thinking about I'm multiplying by the opposite. So if I would have to multiply 3 times 4, so I divide it into fourths. If I divide fourths into thirds, I have to multiply it by 3, right? To get to 12. So I'm going to divide it, and I'm only going to need 2 lines to make it into thirds. So now they all have the same size parts for 12. So now I'm going to record what it is. So I thought it out and it using my actual fraction. So I multiply the denominator to find a common denominator. So the common denominator of 1/3 and 1/4 was what? And Dylan? 12. So now I need to write 1/3 and 1/4 as equivalent fractions using that common denominator. My denominator is going to be 12 on both of these. How do I get there? I multiply 3 times what? Leon.
four above the
Correct. So whatever I do to my denominator, I have to do to my numerator. Over here, 4 times what? It's the opposite, right? So 4 times 3. 1 times 3 gives me 3. So 4/12 and 3/12 are those fractions written with the same common denominator. So both gardens will have how many sections? How many? 12. So now I want to talk about how to find the least common denominator. Remember, it's the least common multiple, right? So I'm multiplying my denominator by different numbers, right? To find something that's common. So remember, multiples of 4 would be 1 times 4 equals 4. So that's the first multiple. What's 2 times 4? 8. What's 3 times 4? 12. What's 2 times 4? 16. What's 5 times 4? What's 6 times 4? 24. Okay, now multiples of 6. 1 times 6? 6. 2 times 6? 12. 3 times 6? 18. 4 times 6? 24. We'll stop there. Okay. Because I give 2 options. Okay. So what is the least common denominator? So the number that's the lowest number, but also in common with my multiples. 12. So I see here, this is my least common denominator. There's another denominator that I could use, but it's not my least common one. What is it? Raise your hand, please. Okay. 24, right? So technically I could use either one of those, but 12 is the better number because whenever I have to get to the end of the problem, right, then I'm less likely going to have to simplify my fraction, right? It gives me the smallest number possible so that hopefully you don't have to simplify it even further, right? So then I'm going to use these least common denominators to write equivalent fractions. And look, it already has it written out for you, right? So 3/4 is equal to how many? 12. And then it shows me that I'm going to multiply both of the numerator and the denominator by 3. Right? So 3 times 3 is? 3 times 3? 9. Okay? Now 1/6, right? How do I get 6 to be 12? Times 2. So I multiply my denominator and my numerator by 2, which gives me 2/12. So 3/4 can be written as 9/12. And 1/6 can be written as 2/12. Are you following? Good. Okay, moving on to the next side. Okay. So I want to find a common denominator of 1/6 and 1/9. So I will rewrite the pair of fractions using the common denominator. So think about the denominators. A common denominator of this might be what? Think about my factors of 6 and 9. My multiples of 6 and 9. 1 times 6 is 6. 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 6 is? Oh, do I know a number that, Joseph? So I know that 2 times 9 is 18. So can I use 18 as my common denominator? Awesome. So I can put my 18 underneath here, right? What did I multiply 6 by to get to 18? What times 6 gives me 18, Bryce? 3. So I multiply 6 times 3 to get 18. So I multiply 1 times 3 to get 3. Now 9. How did I get to 18 again? Multiply by what, Layla? 2. 1 times 2 gives me answer?
Two.
2. Hey, I've written them both as the common denominators. Now that will be an easier problem to do, right? So let's find the common denominators in my fractions here. So 3 and 5. What are my multiples of 3 and 5? Or what do you think is a common multiple of 3 and 5? What can I multiply by both 3 and 5? Get to the same number. Joseph. 15. That is my least common denominator. So if that's my least common denominator, what am I rewriting them as? I would multiply 3 times what to get to 15? 3 times what gets me 15, y'all? What times 5? Thank you. 3 times 5 gets me 15, so 1 times 5 gets me 5 times what gets me 15? We just did it.
3.
3, right? 5 times 3 gets me 15, so 1 times 3 will give me 3. So for all of these, we will be doing this. We're finding the common denominator, and then I'm rewriting the fractions with that common denominator. Okay? Do you think we can do a couple on our own? Or do we want to do at least one more problem? Okay, let's do one more problem. So, I see 3 and 9, right? How are 3 and 9 related when it comes to multiples? How are they related? Liam.
3 can be equal to 9 if it 3 3's
3 times 3 is equal to 9, right? So, do I change both of my fractions? No, I don't. So, I can just rewrite 5 9 as what? 9 is my common denominator, and then I multiply 2/3 by 3, right? So 3 times 3 is 9, so that's my denominator. And then 2 times 3 is what? 2 times 3 is? Everyone. 6. Good job. Let's just do one more just for kicks, okay? So 9 and 15. What do those have in common? I'm gonna have to think about this one a little bit longer. What do we think? Bryce. 45? Do we agree? So what times 15 gets me to 45? 3. And then what about 9? What am I multiply 9 to get 45? Grayson. 5. So now I'm going to write my 45s down here, right? So I got to change both my fractions. My common denominator is 45, right? So I multiplied 9 times 5, right? So I need to multiply 2 times 5, which is what? 10. And then I multiplied 15 times 3 to get to 45. So 1 times 3 is 2. Are we following? Do we understand? Does this help what we did on Monday and Tuesday?
Yes.
Because I know that some of us struggled a little bit because of the fraction strips, but this is more straightforward in looking at the numbers. Okay, good. It'll help you out. So if you haven't finished any of the homework from Monday or Tuesday, you can use this strategy to go back and look over it. Okay? I want you to try 5 and 6 on your own. Okay? Try 5 and 6 on your own. I'll give you a moment. So let's look at these real quick. 5 and 6. Now that you have some time to do it on your own. Okay? Denominator for 4 and 6. So to rewrite only one of my fractions. How did I get to 8 from 4? I multiplied by what? What did I multiply by 4 to get to 8? 2. So I'm going to multiply 1 by 2, and that gives me 2. Simple enough, right? So what was the least common denominator for 12 and 8? You might not be, because 8 would be smaller than 12, and I have to have the multiple of 12 and 8. Well, not 12, because 8 doesn't have a multiple of 12. Okay, 24. Because 12 times what gets me 24? What? What is 12 times what gets me 24? Oh, yeah. 2. So that means I multiply 11 times, which gives me 22. Then 8, what do I multiply by 8 to get 24? Joseph, 3. So 3 times 5 is 15. Remember, whatever I do to my denominator, I do to my numerator. What about number 7? What do we get? Where do we do number 7? What's number 7? What do you think the least common denominator for 5 and 6 is? What do you think? Liam? 30. That's correct. 30 is the least common denominator for it. And guess what? They multiply by what? Each other, right? 5 times 6 gives me 30. So I'll just multiply 5 times 6 and then 6 times 5. So 5 times 6 gives me 30. So 4 times 6 gives me 22. And then 6 times 5 was 30. So 1 times 5 is 5. We all get it? We like it? We understand? Okay. So let's look at this part right here, because I want to talk about how we can find the in-between here, okay? So look here at numbers 12 to 14. You got to find the unknown number for each. So for this one, we just have to find the least common denominator, right? What is the least common denominator for 5 and 8? I think we did it earlier. What's the least common denominator for 5 and 8? What's the least common multiple? Think about what I multiply by 5. Think about what I multiply by 8. And the smallest number that's going to equal, that's a multiple of both. Right? Yeah, it's 40. Right? Is my number always going to be small? No, just because it says least doesn't mean it's a small number. Okay? It just means that it's the smallest multiple that there is of 5 and 8. Okay? What about this one? This one's a little bit different. It gives me my least common denominator. And then I have one of my digits here. What on earth could be the other number if my least common denominator is 50? Joseph. 3. That is excellent. Because remember, we did it up here, right? We saw that 3 and 5, their least common denominator was 15. So if I know my least common denominator was 15, I can determine that 5 and 3 are my two original denominators. Now, this one right here. My least common denominator is 42. What on earth is my denominator for the other number? Wait. 7. Excellent. Because I know that 6 times 7 is what? 42. So my missing piece here is 7. Good job. So what common denominator of two fractions represent? The common denominator of two fractions represents what? Leah.
When they can be to this side. To be
Multiplied to the same number, right? So what I want us to write there is a common denominator of two fractions represents a common multiple of the denominator. Okay? That is all I'm going to do here, and then I'm going to have you do the practice page, okay?